Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel for another Friday night album review. In tonight's review I'm talking about the debut album release from the band Spiritbox Eternal Blue, released today on Rise Records, and the album is 12 tracks and 43 minutes in length. And Spiritbox, I think, are in a relatively unique place in that they have become very popular prior to actually releasing a debut album. I think their sort of series of singles, particularly during the lockdown, saw them gain a surge in popularity, and also a surge in lots of reaction videos on reaction channels, which probably added even more, perhaps a central part, even you could argue, of what has made Spiritbox as popular as they are at this point, at this early stage in their careers. I would like to sort of say, first of all, that one thing I always seem to notice about Spiritbox is their really good sound engineering, and that their layers in the mix with different vocal effects, guitar effects, I think is really impressive, and you always get that really good kind of surrounding sound, which, with so much kind of going on in a lot of these tracks, I think is quite an achievement. I think that this album is also, if you want my overall view at this point, before I go into the tracks, I think it's a very solid release. It's a really solid debut album. I have one or two minor criticisms, which I'll come on to a bit later on in the review. So to kick off this album, we had a pretty good track in Sun Killer, set the tone, gave us the atmosphere, gave us Courtney's kind of range of vocals, and really kind of heavy ending that we got towards this track to sort of set the stage for what we might get from the rest of the album. I thought it did that pretty well. Hurt You is one of my favourite tracks, certainly one of my favourite sort of pre-release singles that we got, and we did get a few singles ahead of this album because there was quite a long lead into the album. But Hurt You I thought was great. I mean, this kind of track had some great hooks in, made good use of Courtney's cleans, and just a really dynamic track, which I loved, as it kind of got, those kind of tonal changes that Spiritbox use quite often. I really enjoyed that in this track towards the end. Yellow Jacket introduced us to obviously Sam Carter from Architects, and that was one of my favourites on this album, I've got to say. It felt like, as well, I liked the way this track was in no way predictable. It sort of had its own journey, and I really liked it partly for that reason. The Summit and Secret Garden was slightly more, showing the clean, nicer side, slightly post-metal feel to those two tracks. Showing the strength, obviously, of Courtney's sort of cleaner, more pop sensibility kind of vocals, and I quite enjoyed those. And then you're kind of thrown back into Spiritbox with the heavy stuff, with Silk in the Strings. And I thought it was an interesting name for the track, because certainly Mike is using his guitar to some great effect in this track, with all sorts of scrapes and slides and all kinds of things going on, with some really cool riffing as well, and Courtney using more of her harsh vocals to good effect in that track as well. So it's kind of like, so far halfway into the album, it's a bit of a roller coaster ride, and I think we get more of that in the second half, kicking off with Holy Roller, and then Eternal Blue, which is actually possibly, along with Hurt You and Yellow Jacket, which I think are my other two favourite tracks, I think my third favourite track on this album is possibly Eternal Blue. I think it's a really great song, beautifully structured, lovely light synth touches in it as well, which I enjoyed, and certainly gave it a slight distinctive feel. I thought it justified its place as the title track of the album as well. I like good title tracks. Eternal Blue is certainly one of those. We Live in a Strange World I wasn't as keen on, to be quite frank and honest. Didn't really enjoy that one as much. It wasn't a bad track, but it didn't sort of feel like it offered as much dynamic as some of the other tracks on this album for me, for my money anyway. Halcyon was good, strong track again, showing Spiritbox's great strength, I think, with real atmosphere and effects, and just a huge amount of range and dynamics in the music. Circle With Me, one of my favourite pre-release singles actually, Circle With Me, I really enjoyed that one. And Constance, which is the more emotional, heavy-hitting, sort of sad end to this album actually, that you get to close it off, and certainly leave you with a vibe of having been on a bit of a roller coaster, because this album does go up and down in the emotions, anger, sadness, melancholy, and then some more kind of upbeat stuff, and it certainly shows a range of things going on. So I mentioned that I had a couple of minor criticisms earlier, so I'd just like to kind of go through those. I think there's maybe one key minor criticism I have, which I felt some of these tracks could have been longer. I mean, there was some really good moments in them, and it just felt like that they could have expanded on these. I mean, you've got to think that a lot of these tracks are less than 4 minutes. It makes it a compact album, but with all that's going on, you felt like they could have developed some of these tracks a bit more, given Spiritbox's potential, right, and their capabilities, I think, as musicians. I really think they could have pushed even harder on some of this album and really gone for broke. And it just felt like maybe they just held back a little and just went for the slightly more accessible side of some of their songs. That's just an honest view. Because I think these guys have within them potentially, if they wanted to go down a more progressive route, I think they have a progressive metal epic in them, I'll be honest. I've heard things like the Mario Effect. I know what these guys can do, and that makes me really want to see a little bit more of that side of them. So that's one pretty minor criticism. I also think that having that long lead into this album didn't necessarily harm it as such. But by the time I got to it, I felt quite familiar with a lot of the songs. I'd heard half the singles and half the album effectively before it came out. So the hype surrounding it and everything just kind of, it felt like it was not necessarily, not necessarily what I just expected, but it felt like a little bit like it didn't exceed my expectations as much as it could have. That said, this is a really good album, and I totally recognise how good this is as a debut album as well. Therefore, it's going to get an 8 out of 10 for me, so those kind of slightly more minor criticisms just bring it down a point or two, in my opinion. I know a lot of people give this a 10, which is fine, but for me it's an 8 out of 10. Anyway, thanks all for watching. I hope you're enjoying this Spiritbox album. It is a really good debut release from them. Feel free to like and subscribe as always. I do rankings, album reviews. Also, I talk a lot about fantasy, sci-fi, and horror, or whenever I sort of aren't talking about music, it's usually about those things. Anyway, take care, everybody. Enjoy your weekends. Bye for now.